Greetings and salutations, internet netizens. This is Wolfphototech, and here we are with another delightful video. This time it's Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is Broken for Dungeons & Dragons 5.2 edition. And the reason why I've referred to it as that is it's, first and foremost, I refer to it as 5.2 because this is the magical point where Wizards of the Coast has updated some things, and in many of those updates, particularly with classes, many of the older classes from, say, the Player's Handbook and earlier books are no longer highly effective in some situations, I should rephrase, they're no longer the preferable choice because you effectively get slightly better versions of them in the newer books, including this one. And some Dungeon Masters have issues adjusting to this because they're basically running off of the old Dungeon Master's Guide or Xanathar's Guide. And some of the newer classes provide just enough firepower or that Dungeon Masters kind of struggle with it. I personally have not had serious issues with it, but that's just because I'm capable of scaling up combats up to 20 enemies and having at least 3 or 4 different types of enemies going against the players, and I managed to make it a nightmare for them. But anyways, let's get on with this. First and foremost, we open to this front section. You got the credits. You got basically the D&D game studio. It's very tiny. When you think about how the balance issues of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, it kind of makes a lot of sense why yeah, there's balance issues with a tiny staff. But anyways, you got the table of contents section right here. You got a little section reference towards using this book, and then you have the character options, which goes entire column to the top of the second column. Then you have group patrons, which is kind of still more player-facing stuff. And then you got magical miscellany, which is still predominantly stuff for players, which goes from here to here. And the magical miscellany is also stuff that can be used by game masters as well, or dungeon masters. But And then you have this little small column right here that's just at the end. That's all the new dungeon master stuff. So there you go. It's kind of obvious which side that Wizards of the Coast rather sells to with some of these things. You got a section on using this book, explaining it's all optional. It's important to remember, it's all optional. This entire book is optional. Dungeon Masters can forbid this book left and right. You got a little section on Unearthed Arcana, and then you got 10 rules to remember. Number 1 is the DM adjudicates the rules. Oh, don't mind me, I have lung damage. I grew up on a farm with mold in the house and smokers, and I got hit in the chest by a hay bale going 60 miles per hour. So that's why my chest is kind of like bent in, flat, and I have a hard time speaking or talking because my lungs actually cannot expand the full range. Point 2, exceptions supersede general rules. Point 1, by the way, is the DM adjudicates the rules. So the DM decides how the rules work in situations. Exceptions supersede the rule, which is basically specific things take precedence over the general things. You got a section on advantage and disadvantage. Number 4 is reaction timing. Number 5 is proficiency bonus. Number 6 is bonus action spells. Number 7 is concentration clarification. Number 8 is temporary hit points. Number 9 is rounding down. And number 10 is having fun. Then you have a little section from Tasha. There's Tasha writing. And then you have a big, pretty image of Tasha sitting on top of a glowing mushroom in front of her grandma's house with some fairies hanging out with her. And then we go into Chapter 1, which is character options. You have a section on customizing your origin, ability scores, languages, proficiencies, swapping around different proficiencies and such. You got a custom lineage section, personality, changing a skill. So you got a little simplification on how to change a skill from something else to something else. Changing your subclass, tiny little section. Training time for your character, simple rules. Sudden changes right down here. And then we go into the Artificer with some nice, delightful artwork. If you see up here, I have a piece of paper stuck in there. That is actually a sheet for my bear, for my current Artificer. And then we go into the multi-classing rules for the basic information for the Artificer, starter equipment, quick build advice, etc., etc. And the abilities they gain at base. Artificers happen to be a half caster. And you got the magical class features: magical tinkering, spell casting, tools required, cantrips, level 0 spells, preparing and casting spells. The magic of artifice section up here, which explains that your magic is derived from items. You got a spell casting ability, ritual casting for artificers. And you also have a artificer spell list right here, which is updated to this book. You got infuse items, artificer specialty, the right tool for the job ability score improvement, tool expertise, flash of genius, magic item adept, spell storing item, magic item savant, magic item master, soul of artifice. And then you go into the special subclasses for artificer, which is you got alchemist, which is probably the weakest one of the bunch, but it's oriented towards status effects and healing, either buffs and debuffs as well. So you got a little bit better range of throwing status effects on enemies. And then you also have some healing, randomization, as well as some debuffs and buffs added into your repertoire. And you get boosted healing with your healing items. Yet again, this is actually the weakest one of the bunch, but it's still enjoyable to play. And then you have the armor, which is basically your Iron Man, which is actually a pretty decent one for a broad range of abilities. It's actually one of the more better rounded ones. It's not super broken, but it's not also super strong. You can customize it towards being more power-oriented or more stealth-oriented. And then we happen to have the Artillerist, which is more the DPS, or damage per second artificer. You have a really nice set of options for throwing out some more damage, but you also have some stuff in here for reducing damage coming back at you. So there you go. And then you got the Battlesmith, which happens to be what my Gnome Artificer happens to be, where you build a companion that goes hanging around with you and helps you fight, and you happen to wear slightly better armor than a typical Artificer, and you have better weapons. You gain proficiency with martial weapons. You attack with the magic weapon. You can use your intelligence modifier instead of strength, dexterity modifier, or attack and damage rolls. I forget that there is you know? Actually, the same armor proficiency as the other ones. But anyways, had a brain fart. But with the Battlesmith Artificer, you have a good amount of defensive abilities for your character, for spells, as well as some offensive ones thrown in. And then you also happen to have a lot of your abilities are tied into your Steel Defender, which, interestingly enough, is one of those things. If your Steel Defender goes down, you lose a huge chunk of your abilities. But your Steel Defender, once you get to like level 9 or something, your Steel Defender is pretty good. Because once you get to Arcane Jolt, you can heal your Steel Defender by attacking, and it helps out a lot. And then you have the section on Artificer Infusions, right here. There's actually a nice variety of them. I'm actually working towards getting our homunculus now. I want to have a bunch of friends hanging out with me. And then we get into Barbarian. We got Primal a Primal Path, as well as a few new features, optional features to throw into your Barbarian. You got Primal Path and Path of Wild Magic. I had a guy that actually was playing a Path of Beast in another Game Master's campaign some time back. And then he is currently playing a Path of the Wild Magic in my campaign. That's fun because he started teleporting all over the place. And harassing the crap out of my horde of orcs. But, you know, they kind of ganged up on him in a horde. Optional class features for the Bard. You start at the start of the Bard section. You got all the way to here, and then you happen to have Bard colleges, College of Creation, which is great for making stuff. And then you have College of Eloquence, in case you want to make your Bard extra bardy, you know. And then you have Cleric. You have some new features here for the Cleric. Which, by the way, all these features, if your Dungeon Master lets you take these features, I would definitely read them carefully and take them all. Some of the features will replace old abilities that you might want to keep. And some are just simply icing on top of everything else. You happen to have the Order Domain Cleric, which I have not played yet. The Peace Domain, which I'm currently playing in another campaign, which actually works out quite nice. And then you happen to have the Twilight Domain, which I played in a previous campaign. It takes about 2 or 3 turns to get everything going on a Twilight Domain Cleric, but once you get all the things going, once you get to yourself 2 or 3 turns in, you are really messing up the battlefield with all your abilities. You got Druid. You got some additional features for Druid over here. And then you have Druid Circles, Circle of Spores, which I have not had to deal with yet or played with yet. You got Circle of Stars, which I happen to have another player in another campaign in which I am a player in. I happen to have another player that uses Circle of Stars, which it's a great DPS extra damage class. And then there's Circle of Wildfire, which another player in another campaign I was playing in actually has used 2 different times into 2 different campaigns. It's amazing. It's great for healing and doing damage in gigantic splashes. And then we go into Fighter. You got a whole bunch of extra fun stuff for Fighter. I definitely suggest you look into that very closely. There's some really good additions. You got some whole bunch of battle maneuvers for your Battle Master. This is a large upgrade to your Battle Master right here, like Quick Toss, Tactical Assessment, Grappling Strike, Commanding Presence, Brace, Bait and Switch, and Ambush. And then you have the Psy Warrior, which I have yet to use or play with, which is awesome. I happen to have a player in another campaign who has actually made a Rune Knight Grappler build with a Grappler feat, and it's amazing because you can basically just lock down and take out opponents. He's actually used it in 2 different campaigns, that build, and in one campaign he literally wrestled a giant kraken in combat and beat the snot out of it. Eventually, the Kraken managed to overcome him, but good thing my wild-shaping fairy druid who flew in, turned into a plesiosaur, and carried him away in the nick of time before he drowned in the water. So there you go. I am known for my wacky characters that are occasionally overpowered in various aspects. Then you have the Monk. You have a whole bunch of nice stuff that they added in for the Monk. Some Monk haters are like, they had to add a whole bunch of stuff for the Monk to be anywhere decent. They did that with a whole lot of other classes like Rangers, Druids, Clerics, Sorcerers, etc. More so with a lot of the martial classes than anything else. You happen to have more new stuff for the you got the Way of the Mercy, which I have yet to use, but I have a player that actually is going to be using it in upcoming adventure. And then we have the Way of the Astral Self, which has not been used. By the way, I did a quick assessment. I heard how powerful the Way of the Astral Self is. It's not a terrible class, but you are basically a walking nuke weapon. Your abilities basically consume a lot of key points rapidly, but you can throw out a ton of damage in a very short order. It's just you have to be aware of the right time to activate it to get the most effect out of it. But anyways, that's kind of the thing with monks. You got some new optional features for paladins, which are all nice stuff. New paladin in fighting style options like Blessed Warrior and Blind Fighting. I actually had a paladin I played myself named Oathpaw, who, by the way, was an Oath of Redemption paladin with Blind Fighting. Blind Fighting came in so handy so many times it's not funny. Because I had another player in the same campaign who had a warlock who liked to make everything black. Like black out everything, use darkness, and I could just hang out right next to him and brawl. You have the Oath of Glory. No one has yet to use that in any campaign I was in. Oath of Watchers, which is interesting in itself, but I've yet to have used. We got some new Ranger options here, which are nice. Some of these Ranger options are trade-out features, so you're going to have to make an assessment deciding whether you want to use them or not. Because in certain campaigns, the old features are stronger as opposed to the new features. However, in the wild grab bag variety of campaigns, the newer features might actually be better off because they're more generalized to a broader range of adventures. And there's actually this whole section right here. This whole section is nothing but new features to add to your character or replace old features. And then you have new Ranger archetypes with Fey Wanderer and Swarm Keeper. I actually have an idea for a Swarm Keeper Ranger. Mr. Bees is my inspiration for him. Or Dr. Bees. So there you go. You got updates for Beastmaster Companions. And then we go into Rogue. The only thing we get from Rogue is Steady Aim, which I have a player in another campaign in which I play with who uses it all the time. Which I'm in a player in that campaign, and it's an awesome feature. Although he has to hunt for every opportunity to use that Steady Aim whenever he wants. Then we happen to have a Rogue Archetype, Phantom. And then we have a Soul Knife in here. And I've seen people use Soul Knife multiple times. And that's actually pretty neat in itself. Actually, 2 different people in 2 different campaigns have used Soul Knife. And then we have Sorcerer with a whole bunch of new spells. And some new meta magic options. And Sorcerer's Vitality and Magical Guidance for your Sorcerer. You have the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, which I have not seen in play yet. And I have not seen... I think I have someone that has a Clockwork, but they haven't quite gotten to Clockwork yet in a campaign. And then we go into Warlock. And you got a whole bunch of new Warlock spells, Eldritch Versatility and Pact Boon option, the Pact of the Talisman, as well as a bunch of new invocations. This is actually one of the few times in which this book actually undershoots everything else. The invocations in this book are not that great. Some of them are good. There's better ways of getting some of these features than taking an invocation. Like Eldritch Mind, you have advantage on Constitution saving throws that you make to maintain your concentrations on a spell. Warcaster is a better option. Although you could trade out Eldritch Mind for something else when you will get further along. You got the Fathomless Warlock, which I have yet to see yet because it's water themed and we don't play on water. because there's a long history. A long time ago, the group I'm in used to play a lot of water campaigns, and they kind of came to the conclusion that water campaigns are terrible because you can only do so much pirating before it kind of goes to crap. Then you have the Genie Warlock, which is awesome. I actually had a player that played a Genie Warlock whose main weapon was a mace in a campaign that I was also a player in, and he was basically a nuke. He could come up to something and there was literally an occasion where he killed a dragon in a single hit because he stacked up all his stuff just right that he just bam, right on the nose. And you're going to power boot that sucker to death. And I was playing the Twilight Cleric I mentioned earlier. And for heckin's sake, he power booped that dragon to death with a single shot right in his nose. Like a croquet mallet right across the schnauzer. That dragon was doomed. But anyways, here we got the wizard, which has additional wizard spells and cantrip formulas. And that's it. And then we have Arcane Traditions, which we have an update reprint of the Blade Singer, which was also in another campaign, which incidentally was the same campaign I had the Twilight Cleric in, and the other guy had the Genie Warlock in. And then we have the Order of the Scribes, which is actually a neat class, but we have not played. The updated Blade Singer was actually quite good, as long as you can keep from being hit. We have new feats in here. A lot of these feats add more of more Warlock, more Sorcerer. Add some good backup options like Shadow Touched, Fey Touched, gives you a little bit of extra get out of jail option. You got some Gunner and Slasher and Smasher, Crusher, and Piercer, which adds a bit more zing to boost to your damage. You got Poisoner, which is nice. You got some nice mind power ones like Telekinetic and Telepathy, which is great. And then we go into the group patron sections, which is an update to another book who happens to have group patrons. I think it was a Critical Role book that had a section on group patrons. And this is actually a rather neat section, but we have yet to use this book section at all. At some point, I'm probably going to try to work this in. I technically have the party working under an adventure association, which is more in lines with Acquisitions Incorporated, but I could transition and add in some group patron aspects to it. Yet again, there's all kinds of nice, fun stuff in here. You got what you got for the options in here is you got an academy, which is basically a wizard school or a research facility. You got different types of perks, academy factorums, types of academies, and so forth. Roles in the academy. And then you have ancient beings. You got different perks from them, and so forth. And then you got aristocrats, a criminal syndicate as an option. I have to check my time on the record. Guilds. I actually probably should read the guild section because they are technically a part of a guild, and that'd be really useful. And then we happen to have a military force, which we were technically kind of a part of, or had members that were a part of in a previous campaign. And we have a religious order patrons. And we got a sovereign, which is basically king or queen, and so forth. And then there's a section on being your own patron, which is kind of neat. And then you got magical miscellany. This first section is all spells. And what I really do like about this book is that they did this really smart option that they used to do in Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, is that they have a section here with all the spells in order of level. And you got the spell name, you got the school, you got concentration denoted here, as well as whether it's a ritual or not. And then they have a section for classes that list out all the classes alphabetically. So you can easily just look here and like see like Booming Blade is an Artificer spell, as well as Green Flame Blade. So, yeah, that's kind of nice. In fact, I'm actually kind of considering those cantrips for future cantrips for my Artificer. And then you have the section on spells. Then you have a little bit of information on traveling to other worlds. And then you got Aberrant Spirit and Bestial Spirit for your summons. And then more summons like Celestial Spirit, Construct, Elemental, Stat Block, Phase Spirit, Fiendish Spirit, Shadow Spirit, and Undead Spirit. Tasha's Mind Whip is awesome, by the way. And then you have a section on personalizing spells. This happens to be an example of Eldritch... This happens to be an example of Magic Missile being cast by someone, and they just simply flavor it as chickens flying at someone. Which incidentally is a null. You got a section on magical themes. So if you want to randomize it from a D10, you could. You got a section on magical items and tattoos and stuff. Information on tattoos. Personally, I kind of would have want them to actually keep the tattoos separate from the magical items. But for whatever reason, they combine the two together. Even though I do understand the magical tattoo functions as an item, as it's a pin that is pressed to someone's skin, and they attune to it, and it becomes a tattoo magically. However, I still would have wanted the tattoo separate from the magic items, just for simplicity of referencing and reading them. Otherwise, you have to jump through the whole book to find all the magical tattoos. Then you have some legendary artifacts mixed in here and there, which is kind of annoying. But anyways, yeah. Various wondrous items. The Rhyme Maker's Drum. And then you have Dungeon Master tools. This first one is talking about Session 0. Incidentally, the advice they give is basically one of those things where people keep ignoring it. And I have personally tried to do a proper Session 0, and so many people basically try to rush past doing a Session 0. So many people will literally show up to the game with their characters already pre-made. So I basically am just at the point where I'm going to put all the information in the Discord for the group, and the group can read it. And yeah, there you go. You got a section on the social contract. A really good video to watch on the social contract is by Seth Sarkowski. He had an older version that was also pretty decent, but he hid it or deleted it, which annoys me because I kind of like having old stuff to watch. You got a section on running the game for one player, hard and soft limits, game customization, house rules, sidekick rules. Incidentally, this is one of those things, in the case of D&D Beyond, I wish they had a character class option for creating sidekicks. So if you want a player to say, like a completely new player to come into a game, and you want to play a sidekick, you can play an expert sidekick or a spellcaster sidekick or a warrior sidekick. You could do that, but as it stands right now, you can't, which is kind of sad. But who doesn't want to play a doggo warrior sidekick, you know? Or a chef that bonks people with his pans. You got a section on parlaying with monsters, which I try to do all the time in games, but people keep trying to go murder hobo. Both in games that I Dungeon Master for, Game Master for, and in games I'm a player in. You got environmental hazard section, which is kind of neat. You got Far Realm section, Haunted section, which is a nice expansion to Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Infested section, which is actually kind of neat. Mirror Zone. Psychic Resonance section. Magical Phenomena section. And then you have Mimic Colonies, as well as a Primal area, or Primal Fruit section. Then you got a section on puzzles, which is a strong emphasis on word puzzles and all that, but that's just because Wizards of the Coast is mostly staffed by writers, and their natural default is just to want to do puzzles with words or word ciphers. And yeah, I do say as a player that this book is easily a 4.5 star. If you are a player, right after you buy, if you're a player, you buy this book first and foremost, boom, and then you buy this book, you most definitely want to buy this book. And if you're trying to save on money, you also buy this book for different race options. Otherwise, you might want to go with, say, like Volos, if you want some other options, or Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, which also has some really good race options in it. However, if you are playing on D&D Beyond, Volo's Guide and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes is no longer available to purchase. And I think the Sword Coast Adventures might have also got pulled into that as well. So anyways, I definitely say this is a 4.5 star. This is highly important for a player to get. It just is. For a game master or a dungeon master, it's not so much. It's like a 4 star. It's very important for a dungeon master to get this book because it does provide some more information that slightly contradicts some things in Xanathar's Guide and the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is part of the reason why I said it's 5.2 edition. But it's also important to buy this book because you're going to have players that are going to come up to you and say, I want to play Twilight Cleric, or I want to play Creation Bard, or I want to play Genie Warlock or something, and you're going to have on-hand reference to their shenanigans. So there you go. Also, there is that patron section that's going to be handy dandy, as well as some new spells for your bad guys to use when you actually get an opportunity to use spells, and some puzzles. So there's some stuff in here as a game master. If you really want to go hunting through the players area to use, you can, to make more difficult foes. But this book is definitely leaned towards the players. So yeah, this is basically a 5.5 star for players and dungeon masters. This book is up in the top. This book is like number 3 or 4 for players. In the you should buy this book. And for dungeon masters, this is like number 8 on the ranking, roughly, like 8 to 10, because you most definitely want to collect your monster books. You want to get your Dungeon Master's Guide. You want to get your Player's Handbook, because you need the stuff out of the Player's Handbook. You want to get your monster books for your variety of monsters. And then once you do the monsters and stuff like that, and you got your Xanathar's Guide, and you got your Dungeon Master's Guide, then you pick up this book, because you're definitely going to need this book, because players are going to pester you with it. So, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful weekend, a magnificent month, and see you next time.